All right, welcome to episode 11 of the Blackbox Diaries for another week here with Chris and Alex. Going to cover off a few interesting things today, some funny things that we came across. Coming up to the last episode of the podcast for season one, which will be released next week, which is going to be absolutely awesome. Then we're going to take a little bit of a break to recap and take some lessons learned from the first season. So thank you to everybody for sticking it out. But season two should be a little bit more improved and a little bit more along the line of what we really want to do with the direction that we're going and everything like that. So stick around. It's going to be really good. And again, appreciate everybody. If you want to like and subscribe, feel free to do so. If you don't, we just appreciate you tuning in to listen. So if you have any questions, any content feedback or anything like that, always open to it. Please drop the community questions down. We didn't do any last week, but we have a few this week that we're going to cover off, and excited to answer some questions next week for you as well on the finale. So without further ado, we'll get back into it. Cheers. All right. First off the rank today, Alex.
Let's rock and roll, team.
Yeah, man. I mean, that I love Brazil, right?
I do.
And
I do.
I'm
Yes.
I'm huge about Brazil. One, the food is fucking top tier, and two, just the culture is amazing. It is one of the
Sure.
greatest places on earth to
Yeah.
visit. I would say everybody should get out there. And I mean, you spent some time in Brazil, so you know what I'm
I
talking
did.
about.
Yeah. I've been there a few times.
It's Yeah, it's amazing. Now, one of the things that I always find really, really interesting is that Brazil is actually home to quite a number of high profile cyber criminals.
Yeah.
And it's not really that well known, but a lot of hacking groups and whatnot, they do have a presence in Brazil. Now, yesterday, US US DOD, however
Yeah.
you want to say it or pronounce, is up to you. But he, obviously responsible for some high profile claims of cyber attacks, including being, one of the ones that posted and saying he had compromised CrowdStrike recently. He's also done, a few other ones, but was accused of hacking and stealing Polícia Federale data in Brazil. And they combined that with information that was essentially leaked about him. He's saying that he was doxxed by CrowdStrike and, a few other organizations, but he actually confirmed in a media source his identity essentially. And, they
Okay.
believe that the combination of that information and the, you know, obviously the attack led the police to arresting him. So I guess that's interesting that cyber criminals are getting docs like that. But I think it's an interesting approach that he's going to come out with an ego that big that he's just going to say
Yeah.
in like a media interview, yeah, that's me.
I mean, that's a hacker. That's a hacker for you. Um,
Yeah,
we all kind of came from there before. It all starts with, at least for me, started with a real drive of curiosity, right? It's very cliche to say, but it is.
mm,
When I first got my start, like you and I have talked about this before, I was about 12 or 13 years old. And AOL came out, or I guess a lot of people nowadays remember it as AOL.
yeah,
And, we were kicking people out of rooms, this, that, and the other. And over time, while you're hacking, you do end up taking one road out of two, right? A lot of these guys take the darker route, right? Because they enjoy creating. I call them chaos agents, and
yeah,
they like it.
yeah,
And then you have some others that are generally more about, I want freedom of information. I want to be able to access things without being authorized, and it's really like kind of like an adventure for them. It was an adventure for me. I never decided, hey, I want to be a jackass and just start stealing
yeah,
people's. You get the idea.
yeah.
But I don't know much about this guy. Do you have any background on him or not really?
Not really. He was just
Okay.
linked to, like a bunch of different hacks, like when he was arrested, he was claimed, that he's disclosed sensitive data of 80,000 members of organizations like Infraguard. Um, some of the other ones that he was, notable around was the Airbus data breach, and also the background checking firm National Public Data in the US, which recently filed for bankruptcy, but there's no confirmation from what I could see that was, the bankruptcy was a result of the data breach. I
Okay.
guess what I found interesting about this guy though is like the arrogance is so blatant in that he had spoken to, they interviewed another person that knows him and basically said, "Oh, I spoke to him this morning." He had no idea that this was coming. Like, even revealing his identity to the media, he was taken by surprise when they rocked up to be like, "Hey, dude, we know who you are and we know what you did. And yeah, you coming here?" So I think just that hacker mentality of like, I'm too good
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
and there's
I'll
nothing that
tell
you can
everybody who
do.
I am. Yeah. I'll tell everybody who I am, but you won't know where to find me. Well,
No. Well, yeah, it didn't take them long, and I guess yeah, he's in a bit of strife now. So I think
what
realistically, sorry,
what nation ended up catching him, you said?
Brazil. He's
Brazil.
a Brazilian guy.
No, no, I'm tracking that, but a lot of times like FBI will,
Uh,
operate with uh, foreign
yeah,
nation states.
there was something about the FBI helping track him down, but I guess one of the things that I took out of that is I spent some time in Brazil, and I've worked with
Yeah.
some people from Brazil and some organizations from Brazil, and I
Sure.
would say like it's a testament actually because there's a very big um I guess view that Brazil's not as advanced from a technology perspective to handle these types of things. But
Sure.
if you go back and search the media about how many cyber criminals they've actually arrested in Brazil, they do a pretty solid job. All right, Alex. Now I do have an interesting question for you about something that I don't necessarily think is a super common type of attack,
Okay.
but it is most definitely an interesting one. Have you heard of a SIM swap attack?
A SIM swap attack. No, I have not.
So, a SIM swap is basically the process of getting your cell phone carrier to reassign a cell phone number from a legitimate SIM to a SIM controlled by a criminal actor. Now,
Oh,
I don't actually understand what processes here probably need to
sure.
fail for that to happen, but that's pretty pretty cool if you ask me. Now,
Yeah, no, it sounds neat.
the reason that I asked that is because the FBI have arrested an Alabama man for
Okay.
breaching the Securities Exchange Commission, the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, the U.S.
Okay.
SEC, for basically taking over their X account using this specific attack.
Oh, interesting.
Um, so it looks like they actually pulled off a SIM swap attack and then using that were able to compromise the social media accounts.
Okay, so
Sorry, go for it.
that's confusing for me.
Right.
so a SIM swap. So they somehow managed to swap their SIM card with another person's data,
Yeah.
and
So it says
then
here, it
it
says,
basically
yeah,
syncs.
yeah, it looks that way. So basically, it says that they gained access and gained control of the Sex X account through an unauthorized SIM swap carried out by counsel, said the Department of Justice in the US, apparently investigating it,
Sure.
right? Now, if they say, as part of the scheme, counsel and the co-conspirators created a fraudulent identification document in the victim's name, which counsel used to impersonate the victim, took over the victim's cellular telephone account and accessed the online social media account linked to the victim's cell phone number for the purpose of accessing SexX account and
Holy
generating the
shit.
fraudulent post in the name of SEC Chairman Gensler. That's pretty cool. But I mean,
That is
honestly,
cool.
I mean, it is cool, but again, I think that's just going to be like, your usual simple failings. Like, what's the validation in the back end for these things to happen? They don't have anything to obviously detect these fraudulent documents, I guess. I mean, they
I
should.
mean, I've yeah, they should. I've got two X accounts myself, and in order to get a blue check mark, for instance, I mean, there's a lot you truly have to prove your identity, both with like a selfie, right, of your face,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then also like a picture of your ID card.
yeah,
And you don't get your blue check mark for generally it takes about 2 to 3 days because they conduct a legitimate check to make sure that it's actually you.
yeah.
So there's also like you okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding this sim swap
Mhm.
attack because the way I'm
Yeah.
seeing this is you're able to somehow transfer someone else's account, so there has to be social engineering involved, and then you plug that SIM card in, and basically it syncs with the other phone as though the other phone is just a backup device.
Well, the way it is. So what they're saying is that they had a fraudulent ID document, right? Which
Right.
basically, they are then, contacting the telephone provider and being like, "Hey, I lost my phone. Here's my ID. Can you give me a new SIM card?"
Yeah.
And then it could be like an eSIM and they've wiped their phone, or it could be a physical SIM. They transfer it to physical SIM, whatever. And then because the SIM card has been replicated, the phone number is synced with that new SIM card, right? And so then they've gone in and essentially done a password reset that's like, what's your phone number so we can send the multi-factor token to? Oh yeah, here's the phone number. I've got it.
Dude, that's
And
crazy.
then
That
they've
takes so
like,
much time.
I know. I mean, but yeah, and then they've essentially reset the password and got access to the account.
Dude,
Then once you've got access to it, just change the phone number to whatever phone number they want, and then how do they get it back after that?
that's
you know,
craziness.
everybody knows how hard it is to get social media account back once you've been done.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah. It's
like
pretty much gone.
it's yeah, it's hard. So that's pretty cool though. I thought that was
It is. It blew my mind. It blew
pretty
my
interesting.
mind.
Well, I mean, I've heard of similar, but not exactly like that. And so to see
Okay.
that happening, it's yeah, it's refreshing because it's a little bit of kind of out of the box thinking and to get access to a an X account. I mean, it's a lot to go through to do that, depending on
Sure.
what you want to do. But I mean, imagine taking that methodology and combining it with something more sinister than just an X account, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be that's a fun one. That is cool. I might even have a look into it a little bit more and see how that works and how that could be used in
I
an
if you
engagement or a
do,
social engineering account. Yeah.
yeah, let me know what you find because I truly believe I'm not understanding exactly how this is done because it just sounds. I mean, it sounds implausible, right? But I mean,
Yeah,
if it
not
happened, it
not anything
happened.
these days. Yeah.
That's fair. Cool. Wow.
That's what I mean. Like it seems that there's some kind of baseline failing here on the telco part, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I mean, like I know, like a little bit of a historical story for me. I used to work for an ISP, um, back in the day. Like one of my very very first IT jobs, I worked on like dial up internet, right?
Sure.
And like that was my favorite, dude. Like people call in and be like, "Hey, my internet's not working." And then it was absolutely amazing because it was dial up. So my first question is always like, "Are you on the phone line calling me with the same phone line you connect to the internet?" And they're like, "Yes." I'm like, "Cool, go reboot the modem and then call us
Yeah.
back." And then I know that they have to hang up to go reboot the modem,
Yeah.
and try again. So then like I was just like fobbing people off like every single day. Now, dude, this is my favorite story from that time, to be honest. I had a guy call me up, right? And
Yeah.
this is kind of relevant because it's kind of the identity checking, right? So I had a guy call up, and this was a help desk job essentially that I had, and he was like, "Hey, yeah, I just need to reset my password." I'm like, yeah, cool, no problem. I just need to run through some identity questions if that's okay. He's like, yeah, no problem. Name, date of birth. All right, cool. Now to reset your password, we have secret question and answers on
Sure.
your account. I'm just going to have to ask you one of your secret questions, and then you have to give me the answer. You know the drill. He was like, yeah, no problem. Now, he only had one secret question on his account, and that was, what is the name of my deceased wife? And I was like, all right, dude. Your secret question is, what is the name of my deceased wife, or your deceased wife? And he was like, Jane. That's that bad. No, that's wrong. And he's like, oh, okay, try Rose. No, that's wrong. And he's like,
It's like, this dude's a mass
He's like,
murderer.
try Elizabeth. And I was like, okay, so no, Elizabeth is wrong. He's like, I'm gonna have to go and think about that. I'll give you guys a call back. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like,
No, don't call me
fucking,
back.
should I call the police here? I don't know what's happening here because this dude is a loose unit, clearly. Now, yeah, the other one that I had there, which is absolutely top tier, was I worked on one of the ADSL1 rollout projects in Australia.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I had a guy call through to me and he's like, hey, I signed up for the internet with you guys. I was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, so I got my modem and my login credentials and everything like that. I was like, cool. Yeah. How can I help? He was like, yeah, I'm just wondering when the computer's going to arrive. I was like, we don't provide the computer, bro. Like that's your part of this deal.
Yeah.
We just give you the internet, So, no, that was amazing. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I met a serial killer that day.
Dude, was the person old? Like you could tell, like audibly he was old. The one that said, "Yo, when is my computer
Nah,
gonna get here?"
just seemed like no, just seemed like normal. I thought you meant the dude that was offing all of his wives, but yeah,
No,
like
no, no, no.
he
No.
sounded kind of like middle aged. So yeah, definitely something was sus going on there. But yes, absolutely crazy. But like what I was trying to get to with that is I know that the telco space in Australia that there's not
Yeah.
really great identity checking and things like that. So these things could be plausible.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. No, no, please, by all means, you go.
No,
You go.
all right, we'll
I'm
count it
having
in.
rasp. Oh, okay.
Just restart the recording.
No, 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 no.
All right, Alex, this is a fun one
Yes.
for you.
Ooh, I'm
Do
excited.
you have many IoT devices in your house? Smart lights, those types of things?
Yeah. Yes.
Cameras?
I d-
Yeah.
no. Well, yeah, I do. Cameras are not. They only run when we're not home. Like if we go on vacation or something like that, we do run them, and yes, they are easy to uh, take over. But they're also not full time. So if our family's home, the cameras aren't even plugged in. And yes, some of the lights that we have are IoT.
Yeah, cool. Do you have a smart robot vacuum cleaner by any chance?
I do not.
I do, and I always wondered, is there anything interesting about them? And I have,
This should be
the
good.
brand that is essentially kind of a little bit of a controversial brand. It's an
Okay.
Ecovacs. I mean, it's a pretty popular brand, but it has been in the news not long ago, for various types of security vulnerabilities and flaws. There were instances where a lady said that she'd been, photographed by her Robo vacuum cleaner when she was doing like nude
Uh oh.
yoga and all sorts of stuff like that,
Oof.
right? Um, Now, the interesting one is they've been done again. Now, a couple of people have reported that their vacuum cleaner was taken over and used to chase their pets around the house while yelling racial slurs.
Shut up. Shut the fuck up.
So, I
That's
mean,
like right out of South Park.
exactly. So they're basically you know trying to say that it's probably kind of a mediocre hacker or somebody just having like a bit of fun. But I
Sure,
mean, realistically, a lot of these devices, they have cloud connectivity, they have network connectivity to, the rest of your network. So if you do
sure.
pop one of these devices, it kind of takes us back to the discussion we had, popping things like printers and stuff like that, and,
Yeah,
things that you wouldn't necessarily think about that might give you deeper access into the home network, right?
sure. Yeah. Sorry, I can't stop thinking about what it could be saying while it's chasing.
Chasing the dog around the house,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Oof. I won't say any of the slurs, but damn, I'll bet that's funny to see, man.
I mean, well, it persisted as well. So they reset the device
Yeah,
and they reset the password and it got taken over again. So it's obviously a systemic flaw that's a bit deeper than just that,
sure. Yeah.
and I mean, like, imagine, that you could pivot from that into the home network and take over,
Ooh.
the kids' devices, the kids' iPads, those types of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That actually is pretty dangerous.
It is, yes. Yes. I would,
You know,
as a
my kids
father
watch
of a
watch the
daughter,
iPad and stuff like that, right?
yeah, yeah,
So you
that
know
would
what that.
be
I
a
mean,
huge problem.
and there was that IoT that IoT thing the other a couple of years ago now, maybe, or it could have been last year or the year before, of the hacker that got into the baby cam in the house, like was
Yeah,
basically
yes.
was yelling abuse at the like making like angry sounds and yelling abuse at the kid through the baby cam, and the dad went in like what so thought there was like a man in the baby's room or whatever, but they were yelling
Right.
through the baby camera. So I mean, these IoT devices at home, like it's really funny, even as security professionals, we think about like how are we going to protect organizations, how are we going to protect
Sure.
our organizations, everything like that. But it's kind of like, maybe being like a chef, right? If you're cooking at a restaurant every day, all day, you don't want to go home and then cook dinner, right? Because you've just been doing that as your job all day, every day.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
kind of similar, as a technology professional, you probably come and go, oh, that's cool. I'm just going to plug that in and just it's my lights, it's my camera,
Yeah.
like whatever. Um, it's becoming a pretty common attack platform that's probably not that well understood from a security protocols perspective.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. I guess one big concern, like if I were the hacker, right? If I was the attacker, when you first brought it up, I was like, well, I mean, if it's sitting on a private network, you should be okay. You've got lights, you've got a racist vacuum cleaner, and whatever else. I mean, you could only communicate with that if you had direct access to the local network. But that also brought me to the idea that what if that network maybe has port forwards to those devices? That would be a gigantic problem, because then the attacker may very well be able to access it from outside, from external, right? And then gain access to the uh, aforementioned racist vacuum cleaner. And then once they have access to that vacuum cleaner, because everything that operates has some kind of operating system, right? Um, and then could you laterally move from that point, dude? You could essentially control it from, I mean, wherever, anywhere on the earth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much. Yeah, and I
yeah.
think yeah, it's they particularly this brand. It's making me regret buying that brand actually, because every time there's been a robot vacuum that's had like a vulnerability, it's always the one that I've got sitting downstairs.
Of course it does.
Please don't
Has
try
to
and
be.
pop me out there, anybody who's listening to this podcast. Um, if you do, you connect to my network though, it's at your own risk. So, um,
It's a scary place.
so yeah, I think yeah, no, that's another interesting one for me. But yeah, take care with your IoT devices, obviously, and make sure that you're buying reputable ones. Never really thought that I would have to research that, because we have a lot of like random IoT devices you can buy at the hardware store and stuff like that are all made in
Sure.
like China and everything like that. And you don't really know what they're doing or where they're connecting and that sort of stuff. So I think, yeah, maybe I'm gonna pay a bit more attention to it.
Yeah, it might be a good point to bring up. I know. if I notionally here had a client that had several customers, and let's say those customers had port forwards, right? Going to the what's the word I'm looking for, man?
I don't know
The
where your brain
router.
goes, buddy. There you
No,
go.
it's it's pretty crazy. Those computers were connected to a router, and the router had port forwards to specific access ports. You could essentially access them from wherever in the world. And I think it's important for people to know that there's easy ways to fix that issue. And one of those ways that's rather simple and very cost effective is VPN services, right? We don't get paid by any VPN services, so I won't bring any up right now. But what you're doing is you're creating a local area network, basically, right? Virtual private network that only other personnel with shared access to that network are capable of actually seeing that port forward, scanning and accessing any machines that are on that network. So highly recommend. There's a lot of freebies out there. So if you are a organization or you're looking to develop a network like that for a client, definitely do a VPN, do something. Do not leave them vulnerable to the external world.
All
Recording
right,
is
Alex,
can
community
yes.
question time.
All right.
Now, the first one for you it's and it pretty much is for you because I'm interested in how you explain it. And then what your view is on it, which is essentially what is actually the difference between a vulnerability assessment, a penetration test, and a red team. Because
Engagement.
engagement. Because this particular person basically did say that they go out and get quotes. They get told by the board. The board goes and asks questions like, when was the last time we did a penetration test? But they don't really understand what a penetration test is.
Sure.
And then the security guy has to explain that, or try and sell to the business the difference between all of the things, and how often should you do each of them.
I'm actually super glad that someone asked that question, and I am going to do my best to try and put that to rest. So if I start getting off topic, Chris, you got to fix me on this one. Okay, so the first one we're going to go with is vulnerability assessment. What is it? It's very structured, and it does exactly what it sounds like it does, right? If I run, and this is an example that'll kind of make this evident. If I ran Nessus Professional, right, a dynamic scan against a network, subnets, group of subnets, whatever, and I do not set that dynamic scan to try and exploit certain possible vulnerabilities are identified, Nessus is going to do its best to try and identify any vulnerabilities that exist, whether they be old vulnerabilities, new, whatever. And you also have the ability to try and limit the number of false positives. Once that scan is completed, excuse me, it gives you the option to write to build a report, and it doesn't build a report and explain to you how this could be manipulated or exploited. It just tells you, these are, out of date. This is how you rectify those issues. So we've already identified this is a vulnerability assessment. Yes, cybersecurity professionals will attempt to manually uh, um, verify that there is a vulnerability there with some other tools, but there won't be an exploitation process. So that's going to take me now to the penetration test, right? So now we've identified a few vulnerabilities, and yes, the assessment itself and a pen test are separate, but during a penetration test, the goal is to identify any vulnerabilities that do exist or could possibly exist. And once we identify those, we are going to attempt to exploit them. Not if it's DDoS on a production, device or server, but we're going to try our best to gain access to whatever machines. And the end state goal of this is to actually obtain administrator privileges, right? That's the whole idea behind offensive security certified professional exam, right? Is to gain administrator access, domain administrator access, or root for Linux machines. Now, by doing that, you are accurately stating to that client organization, you have these vulnerabilities. This is how we were able to exploit those vulnerabilities. Here's how you can fix those vulnerabilities. Obviously, like Chris was saying, you should be doing these, twice a year, or in some cases every 90 days, CrowdStrike. So, now let's talk about red team engagements, because penetration testing and red team engagements are incredibly similar, except during a penetration test, you normally have one operator. You have a generalized scope, so it's most oftentimes going to be a gray box type operation, where you already have target subnets, you have all that stuff. Now, a red team engagement generally will be executed by more than one individual, more than one expert, and also be comprised of more than just a keyboard junkie, right? The goal of a red team engagement is to actually uh, um, oh, emulate a real world attack on a set of systems or networks, right? So a red team engagement will most oftentimes start with social engineering, or on-site physical penetration testing. Nothing weird, right? No creepy stuff. But going up and gaining access physically to the network, plugging in an implant without people knowing, gating sensitive information, and then the next week, let's say, right, that same red team, it will have assessed what's taken place already, and they will develop a plan to move forward, kind of like project management, right? And they, at this point in time, they should have some form of access or backdoor installed for maintaining access in the future. Now the red team will engage generally with everything they've got, just to kind of prove a point. But again, it's important to note that it's not the right answer to do this on production systems or networks. But the end state is to show a large organization this is what could happen. And then at the end of the red team engagement, you're going to outline for them what assets were or could have been affected during a real world attack that took place, and kind of mimicked what they did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I
Okay.
mean,
Okay.
I'll give a dialed back version of it because, I actually got
Sure.
asked this question the other day as well. It was actually by my wife. Like, what is this actually that you do? And I said, like, I'll explain it because I know she listens to this, and a lot of people I know who are not necessarily tech savvy. So
Sure.
the way I explain to them is, a vulnerability assessment is, imagine going to like an apartment building and having a look outside the apartment building. Is there anything, windows open? Are the doors open? Does it have a security guard? Does it
Exactly.
have cameras, and all of those particular types of things? And then identifying all the areas that are weak and areas of ways that you could enter that apartment building without
Sure.
being allowed to have access to that apartment building, right?
Sure.
A penetration test is basically trying to kick down the door to the apartment building, trying to get into the apartment building through the
Yeah.
windows, through the unlocked door, tailgating through those particular types of things, and then trying to get into different apartments, right?
Sure.
And then, one of the big parts of, red team engagements is moving laterally and further compromise once you've got access. So,
Sure.
taking it the next step. of, I've now got access to the building, I've now got access to an apartment. Taking the way that you did that, does that also give you access to other apartments? And does it
Sure.
also enable you to continually come back and access those apartments and continue to take stuff throughout the day, even if they change the locks? Because
Yes.
then you have your persistence and you have your lateral movement, and you have all of those particular types of things. That's more of your
Sure.
red teaming type engagements around, and then imagine, let's say there's a penthouse apartment and that's the crown jewels. That's the one you want to get to. So using all of the methods that you use to get in, plus more advanced attacks, more sophisticated ways to get into the crown jewel and continually get back in there to get information and get data, or in this case, actual diamonds and bracelets and Apple Watches and MacBooks and whatever else they have laying around
Sure.
in a penthouse on the table. That's probably the more simple version of it, if
No, it
that's of
is.
value to anybody. That brings us to the end of episode 11. Getting pumped for the finale next week. It's going to be an amazing experience to kind of close out the first season. Thanks for sticking it out with us while we've been new, still quite a small podcast and YouTube channel, but we appreciate everybody who takes the time to listen and come and hang out with us. Now, based on that, we would appreciate if you do like and subscribe to come and join us for season 2. But also on that note, we actually record this at a ridiculous time for me in Australia, and I'm going to bed.